You never know just how white nationalist will be too white nationalist for the modern Republican Party. You can almost forgive folks like former GOP Congressman Steve King for thinking it's all a little bit of a moving target. In 2019, King told the New York Times, quote, "White nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? Why did I sit in classes teaching me up the merits of our history and our civilization?" With those comments and a very lengthy history of similarly problematic statements, Steve King was stripped of his committee assignments and successfully primaried by a Republican challenger. He's no longer in Congress. You would think that what happened to Congressman King would serve as a maybe deterrent to other Republicans when it comes to this sort of nakedly white nationalist politics, right? That our country is born of its heritage in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, yada, yada. On Friday, Punchbowl News broke the story that a group of House Republicans, including Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene, Arizona's Paul Gosar, were forming an America First caucus to protect so-called Anglo-Saxon political traditions, which is not wildly different from the ideology being pushed by Congressman Steve King. Or for that matter, honestly, if you look at his history, Donald Trump's right-hand man on immigration, Stephen Miller. But it was apparently too much for House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who passive-aggressively sent out a tweet saying the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln and the party of more opportunity for all Americans, not nativist dog whistles. Oh, okay. That sent the America First caucus scrambling to walk it all back. Paul Gosar said in a Saturday statement he did not author the document and that he became aware of it only after it was reported by the news media, while Marjorie Taylor Greene released a statement saying the platform was a staff-level draft proposal from an outside group that I hadn't read. Jake Sherman was the one that broke the story of the new America First caucus. He's the founder of Punchbowl News, and he joins me now. First of all, some clarity on this document. Like, what is this document and who wrote it?
Chris, thanks for having me. That's a good question. But when we went, let me clarify a few things here. When we went to Marjorie Taylor Greene's office, their first comment, and they had the document at this point, was something along the lines of, you know, someone leaked this to you guys, and we'll let you know when we have a final version of this. So they didn't deny its authenticity at all in any way, shape, or form. And Paul Gosar, I don't know if it was the first time that he had seen it, but we had gone to his staff and we had contacted them and they had this and we posted it online. We certainly, Chris, weren't trying to hide this document. So listen, they were creating this caucus. This was material that was linked to this caucus. We never reported that they were the ones that had drafted it.
Right.
But this is a pretty extensive document to have nothing to do with this organization, as they seem to be claiming after, as you said, Kevin McCarthy came out against it.
Yeah, let's also be clear. I mean, Matt Gaetz, when he celebrated it, he tweeted like, "Oh, I want to get in on that action," and then that's before the Kevin McCarthy tweet. And also the Paul Gosar history here. We should just be clear. I mean, it was really notable. He was at the sort of alt-right version of CPAC, right, where he talked to a group, actually uses the term America First, where the person that the America First Political Action Conference, the guy that hosted that, said, if America ceases to retain that English cultural framework and the influence of European civilization, if it loses its white demographic core, if it loses its faith in Jesus Christ, then it is not America anymore. Like this, Paul Gosar this is part of his belief system, apparently.
Well, and also, Chris, to put a finer point on that, Marjorie Taylor Greene, in a tweet, I believe over the weekend, I'm not exactly sure of the timing, said that I had taken, she called me fake Jake Sherman, which does have a nice kind of cadence to it. I will give her that. But she did indicate, she said that I had taken her words out of context and misconstrued them as racist. We didn't use the word racist. I didn't take it out of context. The context was that she said I took Anglo-Saxon out of context, right, and made it seem racist. We posted the entire document. That is the context. I don't know where, and she said it was like her Jewish space laser story from a couple months ago. So listen, I'm not going to try to make sense of what she's saying. I will tell you this, though. This is an important story because, as you indicated in your opening, this is fundamental to an identity that is deep within the Republican Party on the House at this point. And you're seeing people rally to Marjorie Taylor Greene's defense. So, it's very important stuff.
Well, yeah, and I actually was surprised by McCarthy's reaction. That's usually not the way he goes on this stuff. I mean, usually it's like, I don't know, he kind of tends to be a passive and reactive dude. I would not have bet that he would have tried to do that. Were you surprised by that tweet?
I wasn't, because I've been covering McCarthy for more than a decade and wrote a book in which he was a main character. So McCarthy, the way he would think about this, Chris, is there a constituency big enough for me to defend this? And I don't mean that in a glib way. He is not, in my estimation, a white nationalist. He's never said anything of that nature to me. I believe he thinks this is wrong, but I also believe that the way he views this is abhorrent to me, Kevin McCarthy, and it will be abhorrent to enough people that I need to come out and dump all over it. That is how I would assume, again, without having spoken to him about this, how he would think about this.
Yeah, the political calculation here, we should say Steve Scalise is in leadership, and one of his lieutenants who once described himself quite famously as David Duke without the baggage, although I don't think he's penning manifestos that limb along these lines. But just an important point here, and this is something that I've covered the far right, and I've actually covered this line of thinking for 20 years. So this is all very familiar. But the idea that, like, the 1965 immigration law reform, an important distinction between post-1965 immigrants and previous waves of settlers, that previous cohorts were more educated, earned higher wages, did not have an expansive welfare state to fall back on when they could not make it in America, and thus did not stay in the country at the expense of the native born. It also talks about pauses immigration, which has been a great restrictionist cause célèbre. These pauses have been absolutely essential in weeding out those who refuse to abandon their old loyalties and plunge headfirst into mainstream American society. When you're talking about that, you're talking about a quarter of the American voting public. Like, post-1965 immigration is responsible for an enormous number of people, tens of millions of people, some of whom are, conservative, vote Republican, probably like Kevin McCarthy,
By the way, by the way, many of whom are conservative, and Republicans can thank them for having a couple seats in South Florida. Many Cuban immigrants in South Florida that have given them those several seats in that part of the state, and they're trying to appeal to those people because they are conservative voters and they do represent a part of their constituency. Another thing that they said is, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they don't want immigrants, or they want to weed out people who are not willing to assimilate. I mean, if you think, and Chris, you have been covering this for a long time, you think 20 years ago to the George Bush era, when that kind of rhetoric, even for the Republicans, was way out of the mainstream, and you didn't even hear that kind of stuff.
The weirdest thing is actually there's a much more recent example, which is the pivot that Donald Trump himself made down the stretch of the last 2 or 3 months of the campaign, when he reduced how much he talked about immigration, had the big citizenship swearing-in ceremony in the White House and the RNC, ran Spanish language ads in South Florida, and actually did pretty decently along the Rio Grande and in South Florida. So, there's some very recent precedent to point to here, but this is not going away. I think, as your reporting shows, those ideas, that impulse is very strong right now. Jake Sherman, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.